Now that we've proven naturalism to be wrong, we now have a nature with a lot of holes in it, don't we? For every rational being is a being whose very rational existence cannot be explained by nature and therefore doesn't fit in as a product of this total big interlocking fact. But then the question comes, where do these rational beings come from? Where does our rationality come from? If it cannot be explained via evolution and via the history of the entire universe, now we have supernaturalism out there, but we have no seeming explanation for where this invasion of nature could come from. And thus, Lewis is going to use this as an opportunity, the existence of rationality, to prove that there is a God, and that God not only is the creator of reason, but also the creator of the universe when we think it through closely enough. But before we actually get to his proof, we have to clear the ground, because didn't Schopenhauer already prove the impossibility of there being an eternal first cause or creator? So Lewis has to answer that argument. And we also have the Buddhist problem that we have rationality, but does this mean there's a self now? Hasn't the Buddha and David Hume proved that there is no such thing as an I or self? And Lewis deals with that too, though it's not as apparent in the text. So we're going to deal with both of these in this segment. Now, if you remember, Schopenhauer's proof that there is no God depends on a certain concept of what it means for a cause to be a cause, an effect to be an effect. And that concept weds everything to temporal order, to time ordering. The cause must always come before the effect. That's how Schopenhauer then gets us to admit that every cause itself must have a cause, and therefore that there can be no first cause. But if we examine closely this concept of causation, that really is the assumption in science, we find that it does not only leave room open for a cause being simultaneous to its effect, but it requires it. Let's look at it more closely. So now on this new idea, modern conception of cause and effect, to say that C is the cause of E is just to say that there is this pattern, right? This temporal ordering where events of type E follow events of type C in a lawful manner, so that every time an event of type C occurs, an event of type E occurs. Now you notice how we're not just using individuals here, we're talking about types. Because when we say, all right, that wood and fuel and heat cause fire, we're not just talking about particular things, that particular piece of wood, that fire. We're talking about events of this type. That's what cause and effect always presupposes. It presupposes a law that both follow. And that's why Kant, who is the originator of this notion, says what cause and effect is just a temporal ordering of events according to a rule, a hard and fast rule that we would call a law. So thus, this whole picture presupposes that both C and E conform to this lawful ordering, and thus that the law determines the behavior of both the cause and the effect. But if the law determines the behavior, when does it do it? Well, it obviously is doing it in the very operation of the cause to produce its effect, so that the cause wouldn't produce what it produces unless the cause had a certain nature, and the effect wouldn't be produced in the way it is produced unless the effect had a certain nature, so that therefore what you really have is the law determining what the powers and nature of each thing is, and therefore it is that which then determines what follows from that. And in what time is that in operation? Simultaneously. To see this, think of the following illustration that really is simultaneous causation. if you look at this hand sanitizer, you see that it's full of soap. The soap is a liquid. What is the shape of the liquid? What is it determined by? By the container, right? When is it being determined? Well, the shape of the liquid is determined simultaneously with the shape of the container, isn't it? So that if all of a sudden I had the magic power to make the container disappear, then the liquid in it would lose its shape. Therefore, you could say that the container is not just the cause of the shape of the liquid and the behavior of the liquid in the container is circumscribed or determined by it, but it's happening at the same time, the existence of one to the other. And so therefore, there is a concept of simultaneous causation that not only makes sense, but is presupposed in Schopenhauer's very picture of cause and effect. Without this law restricting things to behave in only the manner that they do behave, then change would take place in a very different way. Science presupposes, therefore, that the laws not only describe what happens, but determine what happens, and that determination is taking place at the same time. So now, where do these laws get their force, though? Obviously, not as some rule that just describes. There must be something that gives these laws their power to determine. And that nature or power is what is doing so simultaneously with the existence of the whole process of becoming. It cannot be something that's in time because it determines the whole structure of time and the way events progress. So in our next segment, we will now look at how new discoveries about the nature of consciousness show us that you have to have an I, you must have an ego for even consciousness to take place.